It is the one time of year that Birch Gold gives away free gold with every qualifying purchase. That's right, for Black Friday, when you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, the Birch Gold Group will send free gold to your home for every $20,000 you purchase. Gold started this year off around $2,600 an ounce. By October, it was well over $4,000 an ounce. Why, you ask? Well, you can blame global uncertainty. 2025 has been defined by trade wars, and central banks have been pulling away from the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. Military tension also continues to build. Gold tends to thrive in times of uncertainty like what we're dealing with now. If you're looking to diversify your savings, the Birch Gold Group can help you. Plus, now through November 30th, get free gold with a qualifying purchase. In order to start the process, just text the word America to the number 989898 and claim your eligibility plus a free information kit on gold. But your opportunity for free gold with purchases ends on November 30th. So, don't wait. Instead, grab your phone now and text the word America to the number 989898 for full details. Welcome back to This Real America's Voice Newsbreak. I'm Terrance Bates. President Trump has been busy over the last couple of days entertaining Saudi guests. He, of course, hosted Saudi Arabia's crown prince at the White House yesterday, and today he spoke with Saudi investors.
Tariffs have been, frankly, the best thing that's ever happened to our country. They've always been used against us, and we never had people that were smart enough to use them in the opposite direction. But now you do, and we have taken in trillions of dollars, and it's been absolutely amazing. We're going to be doing a dividend to the people, low and middle income, moderate income people, of at least $2,000. In addition to that, we'll be paying down debt very substantially. It's the kind of money we're taking in. And really, countries that took advantage of us are no longer taking advantage of us.
Saudi Arabia, by the way, has committed to invest about $1 trillion in the U.S. economy.
Working radio show in the business, the Charlie Kirk Show.
All right, I'm going to tell you about TikTok here. Connection and open dialogue. These are the things that build communities. Charlie and TikTok always shared in that belief. That's why TikTok has built a space where that kind of listening actually happens. People don't just post, they respond. They build on each other's ideas. You'll see a teacher simplifying a tough lesson so it finally clicks, or a gardener sharing a trick that saved their crop. But what matters most isn't the video, it's what comes next. And that's somebody posts. They post their own thought. They go back and forth with people. And suddenly people who've never met become a community built on curiosity. When people listen and understand, a shift happens. Walls come down, ideas travel further, and connection takes their place. So check out TikTok. That's where connections are happening. It's very powerful. Charlie did billions and billions of views there, made lots of connections, built a real community. I'm excited about our next guest. We actually tried to do this yesterday and ran into weather disruptions and power outages here in Phoenix. And that's Saagar Enjeti, host of Breaking Points, a really popular show. And Saagar is a really, you're welcome. Welcome to the show, Saagar.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
You are a contrarian thinker on a lot of topics, I think, and you always make it interesting, whether that's daylight savings time or, in this case, property taxes. And you and Blake, I think, are of the same mind here. What is your take on this push in Florida to eliminate property taxes?
Yeah, first of all, just thank you guys for having me. My first time joining the program since Charlie's passing. I just want to commend you both for the job that you guys are doing. And I'm very, very sorry that Charlie and I never got to have the fight about daylight savings time that we were once promised. So RIP Charlie, we will one day be able to have that. But on property tax in general, there's been a new push by Governor DeSantis. This is picking up on quite a few red states, Governor Abbott and others in Texas, pushing explicitly to either abolish property tax or, in a more objectionable case, in my opinion, specifically carve out property tax exemptions for older homeowners. And something that I'm really passionate about is defending the very idea of property tax very specifically, while also being able to critique individual school districts, because I believe that it's very important to preserve the local connection of the taxpayer to the community. And one of my more recent objections right now specifically is that it actually centralizes control of education, of police, public services, and others at the state and the federal level. And if you really think back to the founding of our republic, property tax is in many ways the most American tax that exists. 14 out of the 15 colonies had property taxes by 1796. Thomas Jefferson actually believed that property tax was the most righteous tax that could exist here in the United States. And so I'm concerned more specifically at a very high level that this is largely a giveaway to the wealthy landowner class, which, yes, also disproportionately happens to be much older, and that it is not one that prioritizes younger families, turnover, and other healthy elements of a housing market, which remains, as you guys know, as Charlie knew as well, one of the central pain points for the burgeoning American family. And if we care about families, caring about housing, housing policy, school district funding is something that we all really need to think very deeply about. And I just think this goes in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So I just want to say, we always invite response from our listeners, freedom@charliekirk.com. And I will say, the discussions we've had on this topic have been volcanic. We've gotten a ton of emails about it, and I'll be frank, they are mostly hostile to you and me, Saagar. That a lot of people, and we got a lot of very authentic stories. People talking about how they had to work and save their entire lives to be able to their homes, or how they are, there are seniors who are economically struggling right now and they feel singled out, and it's really bad. And I don't want to downplay any of those things. And I want to emphasize, we are not engaging in generational warfare on the old. I am not advocating dispossess the old. We're not saying the old are villains, but what we have to recognize is, if we're going to change our tax system to make American life more affordable, that's the goal of this. The goal is fighting for affordability. We have to think who benefits most, and also who is actually hurting the most in America. And what Saagar, is Charlie talked about this all the time. The people who are in the most dire situation in America are the young. They feel like they have no path forward to what their parents and grandparents had access to. And as a result, they're becoming very radical on the left and on the right in many cases. And so I think it would be disastrous for us to pursue a tax policy of just abolishing property tax when it is almost certain that this will mean raising the tax burden that is paid by young working families, because the offset to this is almost inevitably going to be higher income taxes or higher sales taxes. It's like a balloon. You squeeze the balloon somewhere and it will expand elsewhere. And so we have to think, where is that balloon going to expand? Right.
And let me just back up. Let's talk about Florida specifically, right? So the Florida Policy Institute, estimates there's some 1.5 million Floridians who live in school districts where actually 50% of their funding, over 50% of that funding, comes specifically from the homestead property tax. That's about 5% of the Floridian population, but you have some $18.5 billion in shortfall that an exemption of homestead property tax would happen. Now, as Blake said, inevitably, especially in a state like Florida, where you have no income tax, the money is going to have to be made up from somewhere else. So that could impose like a tourist tax. If you guys have ever stayed in Florida, different rates for hotel rooms if you're a Florida resident. If you're not, and of course, it's not like the Disney vacation for a family member is already not exorbitantly expensive. But secondary to that is it will almost certainly have to be made up in some other form. Sales tax is usually the way that this goes about. And one of the reasons I'm really passionate about this is I grew up in the home state of Texas, and I think it's really important to say that one of the things I'm proud of is that so many Americans who live in unaffordable hellholes like where I am here in the DMV, where childcare is $150,000 a year on average, actually literally where I live, where the median home values are well over $1 million. I think that's disastrous. I think it's the most anti-family place in the world. The median home buyer around here is some 40 or 50 years old. I'm very proud people are moving to my home state of Texas to raise families for affordable housing. But what recently happened is what we took is that family dream and and instead we basically pass off the societal compact. We're all in this together. The silent generation paid property taxes for boomers whenever their children were going to school, and now by abdicating that responsibility and explicitly trying to take school taxes out of seniors and I understand, about the cost of living increase, et cetera, for Social Security not necessarily keeping up, but it is important to note that this idea about so-called fixed income is one that actually does apply across the entire income spectrum. Blake, I thought you made a really excellent point on the show earlier, where when a young person who lives anywhere and sees a 30 to 40% increase in their rental income, the median conservative argument to that is, well, I'm sorry, the free market has consequences and you're simply going to have to move. And, the point about the societal compact is when we also start to talk about Medicare and Social Security and the entitlement funding, which currently is being outflowed, being paid for by the younger generation. I just think it's important for that compact that we all explicitly pay into and support the system. And I don't think there's anything more important than supporting younger families right now who, as Blake said, ultimately tax policy is a zero-sum game. Like the funding does need to come from somewhere. And largely, the vast majority of Americans live in states right now where they have they have exemptions for older homeowners, and increasingly pass the buck to the younger homeowner, the younger family who is having a lot of difficulty making ends meet right now. And that is my singular mission, if there is one, is to try and to advocate for policy which will actually make it easier for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, I think everybody's heart is in the right place. We want more families. We want more marriages. We want to restore the social compact for Gen Z. My one pushback here is, and I want to, I was not aware that Thomas Jefferson said it was the most righteous of all the taxes.
One of the most righteous, yeah.
One of them. Please explain why, if you know, why he said that, what his rationale was for that.
Sure.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, at the time of the colonies, it's very important to remember, and you guys discussed this as well, the idea of a general income tax or a capital gains tax or any of these other taxes was anathema. Really, a lot of it was alcohol taxes like a Pigouvian sin tax. It was tariffs, and it was property tax. Property owners were the only ones who could vote at that time. But very importantly, it was seen as a way, as the property owner themselves is benefiting from the social benefit of what it would pay for. Let's say from the mail system to eventually evolved into cops, into schools. And that's why 14 out of the 15 colonies by 1796 had a property tax on the books. In fact, there used to be something called a general property tax, which we don't even have anymore. And so I really do understand how difficult it can be, when you look at your mortgage, and especially with the so-called reassessments of home values. And more importantly, people saying, I don't feel like I'm getting enough for my property tax. But my real message to you is you have the ability to change that on a level more than any other. I mean, if you live in the state of Florida, there's millions of people who live in the state of Florida. Realistically, your ability to campaign and to change policy at the state level is very low. And, issues that you guys have talked about here on the show, one reason why parents felt so much courage to come and speak up, let's say against critical race theory or transgenderism, was because, as taxpayers, we pay into this. We're directly funding it, and we have that access. And by removing that, you actually really do remove the social compact between the parent and the locality and the ability to influence turnover and ultimately to govern our own destiny, which is what local government really is all about. From our police force, from electing sheriff, so much of this is actually baked deeply into the American spirit. And so long way to answer your question is it was about localism, and it was fundamentally about community, and it was seen as both a way to raise revenue, but also to turn people into good citizens and to recognize the ability for us to influence where those policies can, which direction they could go.
Well, I want to flag this only because we did get an email recently pointing this out from Heather in Florida, who says there are proposals where it would eliminate the ad valorem property tax except for school funding, which might be, I think it'd probably be a superior way, other than the fact that, obviously our public school funding is one of the most wasteful things we have. But
I have another historical question for you, Saagar. I'm curious because we're talking about the landed gentry were the only ones that could vote back at America's founding. Was it just a property tax on working farms and productive pieces of land that made a revenue, or was it actually a property tax on if you owned a home in a township somewhere?
So it was colony by colony, and it was also what Blake is saying is about the general property tax. So it wasn't just necessarily on that; it was also on the amount of stuff that you actually owned, and its overall assessed value. But it was variable and different a little bit. And from some of the reading that I have done, I do think it's important though to address that point and to where we're talking about today, which is one of the reasons why I think this is really important is because the home ownership class largely is on the older side of the spectrum. And one of the things that I think all of us on this show are trying to get into is how can we make it so that younger families can afford homes. And so ultimately, when we have so many policy proposals, which largely are going to benefit some of the older Americans, which are, rapidly appreciated their own housing stock, which, if you look at their stock portfolios or overall wealth generation, we should also be looking perhaps at inverse proposals. Let's say, oh, well, if we're going to, let's say, give exemptions or others, then we need to look at where does it encourage, let's say, a first-time home buyer and others. And I think, unfortunately, like I said, in my home state of Texas, we're going in the opposite direction.
No, I think this is a really important conversation. We're going to keep having it on the other side of the break here because, my heart does go out for fixed income seniors that have seen their property values go through the roof, and especially since COVID, and their properties are getting reassessed, and the bill keeps piling up. But Blake has counters to that. I know that. First, I want to tell you about Patriot Mobile, patriotmobile.com/Charlie. There's a lot of choices for your cell phone wireless providers. Oh, well, I'm going to keep doing this one. For more than 12 years, Patriot Mobile has been on the front lines fighting for our God-given rights and freedoms while also providing exceptional nationwide cell phone service with access to all three of the main networks. Or you can do what I do, and I have I have a dual SIM, so I have two networks on my phone. I never am without service, it seems. So don't just take my word for it. Ask the hundreds of thousands of Americans who've made the switch and are now supporting causes they believe in simply by joining Patriot Mobile. Switching is easier than ever. Activate in minutes. Keep your phone, keep your number, or upgrade. Patriot Mobile's all U.S.-based support team is standing by to take your call. 972-PATRIOT, 972-PATRIOT, or go to patriotmobile.com/Charlie. Use promo code Charlie for a free month of service. We'll be right back.